All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on STEM in the classroom. My name is Andrew Steinman. I'm one of the EdTech consultants here at Kent ISD, and I'm going to help moderate today's webinar. Today we have Wendy Vogel and Avery Nkuba, which you can now see. Maybe give them a little wave. So I'm just on the other side of the table, so you can't really see me right now, but just know that I'm here and I'll be helping out by following the chat and maybe bring up any questions that come up in the chat. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to introduce yourself, share your name, where and what you teach, and what brought you to today's webinar. That information will be helpful to our presenters. And also, if you have questions along the way, feel free to just throw those questions into the chat, and I will share those with the presenters, and they may address those questions as they come up in the chat, or they may wait until the very end of the webinar to address those questions. So please, as soon as those questions come up, just throw them in the chat. And if someone else that's participating has a response that they want to share, go ahead and share that in the chat as well. So I'm going to pass things off to our presenters. So I guess thanks for attending, and here's Avery and Wendy.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for first this year in a series of webinars called STEM in the Classroom. Joined here today by the lovely Wendy Vogel, who will introduce herself in just a second. I'll start by introducing myself, and my name is Avery Nkuba. I'm a STEM consultant here at Kent Intermediate School District. I've done that for, it's now my third year. Before that, I taught aircraft electronics at the Kent Career Technical Center. And just a little bit before that, I was in airport management for FedEx Express. And I still get the opportunity to go and flight instruct at a local college. So that is a good time. Wendy, tell them about you for the ones that don't already know
There's
you.
a few on here, I know. I am actually the science consultant here at the ISD, but that is a recent job change. So for the last 18 years, I've been in Kentwood Public Schools, and I'm sort of wearing my teacher hat today because Avery and I worked together when I had my sixth graders a couple of years ago, and so that's kind of what we're doing today. And so, yeah.
Little recap of some work that we did while Wendy was still a classroom teacher. So let's see, just kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about. We usually shoot for somewhere around 40 to 50 minutes for these. We might go a little bit over, we might go a little bit under, but that's about what we shoot for. I think the published time was 4 to 5 o'clock, and in that time, we're going to offer the Kent ISD's definition of STEM. We're going to talk about the lesson overview, the lesson that we had done together, just kind of give you guys an overview of that. And if you look in the chat, there's a link at the top of that chat. I shared a Google Doc link. So you should be able to click on that, and that'll take you to the lesson plan. You can look at that now, or just kind of wait until we'll start talking about it, and it'll be on screen here too. Then we're going to talk about the student perceptions, because student voice is very important in all of our work as educators. And we're going to talk about some of Wendy's perceptions of how the lesson went, things that she might do the same or things she might do differently. And then we'll have a question and answer session. So like Andrew mentioned, we will take some questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat right now, anything that comes up, but we will specifically be answering those towards the end. And we'll close. So let's jump into it. So what do we mean when we say STEM? So I'm a STEM consultant, right? One of the first things that they had us do when we got here to the ISD was sit down and say, okay, well, what do we really mean when we say STEM? And here's our definition. STEM education, so it's those 4 areas, right? But STEM education is the integration of science, technology, engineering, and math to solve a complex real-world problem. And you can see here there's a number of, what would I say, industry partners that we have at the ISD. And every time we talk to one of these folks, business owners, talent development entities, they all say to us, look, it's really hard to come up with talent in those fields. People that can communicate, that can solve problems, real world problems that we're all paid to solve. They're trying to staff their engineering firm or their computer house or their IT or whatever it happens to be, and they're really struggling with this. So being STEM literate is important, not just for the folks that are going to be those frontline number crunchers, but really a lot of different roles, whether you're going to be in management or leadership or whatever. It's a pretty STEMmy world out there. So that's our definition. Wanted to share with you a video of what a business leader means when they say STEM. So this, forgive the quality of this when I turn this on. This is a Skype call from Mr. Hayden Land, and he's a Vice President of Engineering at Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed Martin's a very, very large defense and military contractor. They develop a lot of technology that we all benefit from. And maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years now, he was able to Skype call in, and we recorded that. So I'm just going to share that with you a moment. And I got to make a couple clicks, so bear with me here. And I should be able to open that up, and we'll watch this together, about 2 minutes long.
The United States was number one in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And in a recent survey and analysis by the World Economic Forum, they ranked the United States 52nd in the quality of mathematics and science education in the world, and 5th and declining in overall global competitiveness. Regarding the evolving careers, a typical scientist and engineer that I have in my organization today, they are great problem solvers. They have a problem, they break the problem down, they get rid of the dust, and they find the answer, and then they can act on that answer. Artistic or creative people, they can start with an idea, expand the idea, connect it in different ways, and go in multiple directions. A lot of the jobs that we're starting to see emerge today, such as data scientists, neuromorphic architecture, web archaeologists, nanocomposite engineer, cyberfractologists, biomimicry analysts, which will likely be some of the top jobs of the future, like many of the top jobs today didn't exist 5 years ago. They're going to require people who can do both, convergent thinking and divergent thinking. So the integration of multiple disciplines, be in position to obtain and succeed in dual degrees, be a psychological computer scientist, a medical mathematician, a sociological engineer. Those type of converging disciplines and having the left brain and the right brain be able to send signals back and forth, I think is something that I'm looking for from education.
So let me just bring our other screen back here real quick. Okay, so Mr. Land had obviously some opinions, and I'd like to draw attention to kind of the second half of what he was talking about there, having multiple disciplines interact and having a student or a learner, or in his case, an employee, that can take the thinking from the creative world and the where ideas are generated and have that interface with the side of mathematics and engineering and physics and how the world in which we live works, and come up with a new solution to something is kind of where Hayden lives and what he hopes to be able to attain. So I'm going to kind of turn the show over now to Wendy. I've kind of set the stage on kind of what we at the ISD talk about, what we mean when we say STEM. And Wendy's going to start talking about this lesson that we were able to work on together. So Wendy, the floor is yours.
I'm going to sort of give a general overview of the unit that we were in. This was a 6th grade classroom. And the essential question that we were asking over the course of quite a few weeks was what are some different types of energy that are found in our community. That's currently a 6th grade GLIC. It's also found embedded into the middle school next gen standards as well. We took a lot of time to answer this question since it is our overarching question for this activity. So classroom activities included some sort of building towards an understanding of all types of energy and energy transfer. And then when we were doing this, I had spent some time at the airport with a different program, and I had some students that knew Todd Olson who works there, and then we met Avery as well, and they said, well, come and let's figure something out. And then the following year, that's when Avery stepped into the STEM role, and he said, you know, you said you wanted to come out here and do something like this. Let's do it. So we did, and I said it will fit very nicely into our energy unit. So we took some time talking basically over email, I think.
Yeah.
And then we decided that assembling and disassembling motors in your facility that you used to teach in, as well as touring that facility, would be a high engagement piece and fit very well into the unit. So that was sort of what we ended our unit on, was that piece. So that's kind of the overarching idea. We decided, since your teacher's on the other end, we'd probably just walk you through a little bit of my unit, so you kind of had an idea of where it fit. So if we move to the next slide there. Okay, so our beginning of our unit starts with what are some different types of energy found in our community. And I had the students answer this question. So it's different for every hour, but we had a variety of things and examples that they're very familiar with, very much easy collection of information for me. And then if we keep going, then what we did was just became a little bit more familiar with each of those types of energies. So I had stations set up in my classroom, and students collected data, and this was their choice how they collected the data, but they chose to do it in a data table type format, and they did everything from a frisbee. This frisbee happened, yes, they got to go outside and play frisbee for a minute, but they also had a frisbee that would turn to color in sunlight, so that had both light energy involved as well as kinetic and potential while they were outside. Played with some tuning forks. They had rubber bouncing balls, some that bounced high, some that didn't bounce at all. They had to try to construct a battery-operated light bulb from just some aluminum foil bulbs and batteries. They had just a thermal energy fish that just sort of curls up in your hands so that the warmth makes it curl. And then they had a radiometer, which has black and white sides, and if you shine light on it, it spins. So there was some light and heat energy involved in that one. And then we had some sticky fingers, those little sticky things where you fly and grab a piece of paper and they fly back, you know, the ones that you find in vending machines that you want to take away from your children after they receive them, so your wallpaper doesn't come off the wall, but those types of things. So yeah, they collected that, what it happened, and what types of energy they.
So a lot of different
formats,
energy types.
a lot of different energy formats. So, and then the students came up with a list of different types of energy formats that they were familiar with, that they both had already known, and then maybe some that they didn't get after they went through those stations. So now that we had these, then we took some time in the unit and broke each of those types of energy down a little bit, so that we were prepared. We did not, the only one we didn't do in this unit was light and sound, because that's currently a 7th grade standard. But the rest of it we hit pretty hard, and the motor piece went really nicely in that at the end. So and just going through some of the things that we did in class, just to give you an idea that there's a lot of science behind the energy piece before we came to you.
Yeah.
We did some potential kinetic energy pieces where students dropped balls and see how high they could bounce back up, different varieties of flooring, different types of balls, just giving them a variety of things to choose from and sort of test. And we had that particular lesson was differentiated for students as well, which was kind of nice. If you continue on with that, we had also, we did phase change, so energy and temperature was in there as well. They did some melting of ice, boiling of water, and freezing of stearic acid.
Can you tell me about Macaroni and Cheese Girl for a second?
I can tell you about Macaroni and Cheese Girl.
I found this to be, when we were kind of reviewing this before the webinar, I thought this was a great story. Tell them about Macaroni and Cheese Girl.
Sidebar for a minute. Yeah, if you're familiar with middle school science, this is sort of standard operating procedure, but students don't typically know that during a phase change that the temperature actually remains the same. So during freezing or during boiling, that the temp doesn't rise at all. So we had a lab where they tested that piece to see whether they guessed rise, fall, or stay the same with the temp. And it stayed the same for all the groups. They collected data and they graphed it. But I had one student who was just adamant that it wasn't right. And I said, why? And she says, well, it's macaroni. It's when I boil pot on the stove and I'm getting ready to make macaroni and cheese, it goes up. I know it does.
The temperature
goes up
when I'm boiling water.
Oh, yeah.
And she was sure the temperature goes up.
She was angry at me, just angry, angry that her graph didn't match what she had an idea behind her head was. So I said, okay, so why do you think it didn't go up? Well, you used the wrong kind of beaker. I want a regular pan. I don't want one of those Pyrex beakers you have in class. Okay. So we gave her a regular pan and she tried it again. And sure enough, that temperature stayed the same. She wasn't quite as angry, but she was very frustrated with me.
So that's kind of the piece when you say, okay, prove it, show me.
Yep.
And the student has to step through, and I forget the exact terminology, but it's something like when we misunderstand something. I'm forgetting my word here, but
Sure.
when we have a presumption about the way the world works, and we prove through science that your description of how that works, while the description is right, what's happening behind the scenes isn't exactly right. I just found that to be a pretty entertaining story about how students like, oh no, it's definitely getting warmer. Well, how do you know? Do you actually have a thermometer in your macaroni and cheese when you're checking it? Because that's what we did here. I thought that was a great story.
She was angry. It was funny. Okay, so yeah, we continued on with basically the set of standards that we were talking about. What is heat? How is it transferred? Those were questions that students actually asked on a parking lot in my question. And so we went in my classroom, excuse me. And so we continued on that path with conduction, convection, and radiation as well. And I think toward the end, I think this was the last piece before we got into electromagnetism a little bit.
So again, with energy transfer being kind of the theme of this unit, and then all kind of leading towards the way we capped it off, where we're able to work together on that electrical transfer of energy.
Yep. So our students, before we hung out at the airport with Avery and everyone there, we did build some motors, some real basic motors and some very basic electromagnetic magnets. And you can see some pictures of those basic pieces. I used the TOPS lesson plans, which I have a link on there if you'd like to purchase those. They're downloadable, they're reproducible, and there's lots of resources there, elementary through about 8th grade. And so those pieces are really easy to purchase, and the rights for those are simple as well. But we built those. You can see some of our students, and then we went and hung out with the group at the airport, and they disassembled and reassembled actual motors off of airplanes. Correct? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I'll talk
and saw the real world connection between what they were doing in a science classroom and what is actually career possibilities or happens in real life situations and that kind of thing. The interest level was amazing, and you can see a couple of my students right there working on those right now.
So let me kind of take it from here in this lesson overview. This link that I'm about to click on is the same link that you can, it's the lesson plan that Wendy and I had written around this. So I'm going to click this and open it, and I need to change how I'm sharing this with you guys. So hang on one second. And now we go share my screen. And as soon as Google catches up with us here, there we go. Almost. So where we start with this type of material is with an industry problem. And again, if we're using science, technology, engineering, and math to solve a real-world industry-based problem, that's kind of the piece. That's what we want the students to see. So here our industry problem was starting a car or a plane, or really you could say any type of engine is going to take a lot of mechanical energy. And if you have to do it by hand, it's physically tiring. Can other types of energy be used to accomplish that work efficiently? And since Wendy and her team of students were working on, well, energy transfer, let's zoom in and take a look at that specific application of science and technology and mathematics. With our driving question for this lesson embedded in that unit being, what would make an electric motor turn, right? And then you can see here we've got some learning performances and outcomes. And this is kind of a basic lesson plan template that we use to frame our, do we need to zoom in a little bit more? I'm being told by my moderator I need to zoom in a little bit more. How's that? Is that better? Good. Okay. So when we look at these lessons, this is a template that we fill out, and we guessed the lesson time frame about 2 hours, which I think ended up being just about right.
Yep.
As you were, the students got on a bus and they came out to that facility where we were able to work with them. And really, the only reason that we had them come to the airport is I had a bunch of tools there, some of the equipment that we could work with. I've also done this same work in other classrooms. I just, you can get an old electrical motor from usually like a junkyard, and a lot of times if you walk in and tell them, hey, I'm a teacher, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do with my students, they're like, here, we've got 9 of these things that we're not going to rebuild, have them. Or an old car battery and some jumper cables really is what we did, and then just some basic screwdrivers and things like that you'd have probably in a lot of different people's garages. Some of the topics that are covered, you can see the standards, but really I want to zoom in on, okay, so what do we do? So the background information, which Wendy kind of laid out how this was embedded in the unit, energy can take many different forms, can be transferred from one form to another, and electrical energy specifically can be generated, stored, and transferred. And then when there's a current flowing through a wire, there's a magnetic field generated, and that actually, understanding that is, I believe, one of the standards if you kind of click through those. Magnetic forces can be repulsive or attractive. So, if you put 2 like magnets together, I know you know this, 2 like magnets together, they push each other apart. And by specifically arranging magnets and conductors, you can get a lot of mechanical force. So that kind of answers that question of, okay, so how can we use this to alleviate having to start something by hand? Some vocabulary here, and Wendy, I'd like to get kind of your feeling on this. When your students, and this is, maybe I'm stepping ahead a little bit here because we are going to talk about student perceptions in a second, but some of that vocabulary, how do they interact with that? When it's contextualized, if we're talking about an armature and a commutator, how do they interact with that?
Well, we had a little learning curve when we came to the airport because
Yeah.
we don't spend we don't spend time on that type of technical vocabulary in the classroom. So what was nice that you had set up for us was there was a combination of 2 different situations going on at one time. There were some video clips that you had prepared for half of our class at one. We did a tour of the facility first, but then after that,
You got to answer the questions.
Right.
When you put them in a building like that, they're like, wow, and
Yeah.
they won't listen to you if you don't let them look around first.
So yeah, right. So we got to hang out with the airplanes and helicopters first. But then when it came to lesson time, half of the students were in a classroom going through some of the videos, and I stayed in there so that I could bridge some gaps between the vocabulary that we do use and some of the more technical vocabulary that was used
Stuff that's used
on
in
the
industry.
videos. Right.
This is what we talked
Yeah.
about. This is what they're doing within
Right.
business. Yeah.
And then I think, were outside with another adult or 2 that I brought to hang out with the motors and actually assemble and disassemble them.
So
that was kind of a nice bridge.
How many kids at a time were we bringing? I can't
I
remember.
think it was probably, I would guess, about 12 and 12. So we had about
Okay.
24 to 30 total, depending
Okay, so
on the
30
day.
kids, and I would have 15 of them in the lab taking apart motors,
Yep.
and you'd have the other 15, and then we switched, right?
Yep.
So some of them learned that bridge between, okay, this is what we learned in the classroom, here's how it's applied in a real world industry
Yep.
first, and then they would come out and do the disassembly. Other groups jumped right in with the hands-on
Yep.
part first, and then they learned kind of that background knowledge
Yep.
piece. Okay. Some materials needed. We've got a list here. The first several things here, Wendy, these are kind of the items that you used in the
Yep,
classroom.
up through the steel bolt piece.
Yep, so the batteries, paper clips, and that. And then the second half are some of the pieces of equipment that we had available at the Aviation Center. And again, a lot of this is going to be stuff that you'll find in, Dad, Grandpa, Grandma, Grandpa's, garage, barn, whatever you got. Even, if you've got a guy around the corner that tinkers with stuff, that's the kind of stuff that you'll have. And those lessons videos that Wendy's mentioning,
Yep.
I've got them embedded right here. The first one, I'm not going to click on each of these. You guys can do that whenever you feel like taking a look at it. But the first one is a hand starting. So basically there's 2 guys, they've got a big crank, and they stick it in the side of an air. Actually, you know what? This one I did want to show. So I'm going to click on that a second. And I'm going to ask my moderator a question. If I play this, will they be able to hear it? They won't be able to play it or hear it. Okay, so I won't play it then. So here's what's happening in the first. I'm going to change then. If you guys won't be able to hear it, I'll let you click on it and watch it for yourselves. But that first video, two guys stick a crank in the side of a motor, and they crank it up, and you can really hear the flywheel spinning up. It's like, and you can see them going faster and faster. And once they get it cranked up to a certain speed, then they go contact, and they push this button, and that flywheel engages. So they've stored all that mechanical energy, and then they suck it back out, and that's what starts the motor. So that's that inertial starter. Actually, I misspoke. That's link number 2. Link number 1 is just cranking a motor by hand. You reach up and you spin it like this, and if you do that enough times and you're sweaty enough and sore enough and tired enough, eventually the thing will start. The second one is that inertial starter that I was talking about. So that's that you're taking mechanical energy, storing it in this flywheel, and then transferring it into the motor to get it to start. The third one is just kind of a piece on electromagnetism and how that works. And then the last one is an electrical relay, basically an electromagnet. It's what starts all of our cars. You use that to make a connection between, your battery and the starter motor momentarily until your car starts. So the process on this lesson, and again, it was all embedded in that energy transfer unit that Wendy kind of laid out for us at the beginning. Our goal was to disassemble, inspect, reassemble, and functionally test your motor. Now, this was really cool because when these students, and we're going to show you some photos of some of this, but as these students were stepping through this, when we had them apart, I would have a short discussion with them and say, okay, remember how you guys talked about a circuit, right? So you guys learned about circuits, and the root word there is CIRC, and that's like circle, right? If you don't have a circle, you don't have a circuit. So I was able to show them these things that they had built where they're turning on light bulbs and getting their, small electromagnetic motors to spin. The exact same principle is used in equipment that they're dealing with every day. When they ride the bus, that's started by an electric motor, their car, anything like that. It's all going to have that same principle at work. So they're going, okay, yeah, I get it. And, I showed them the path of that electricity is going to follow through the brushes, into the commutator, through the armature. And when the current flows through there, you get a magnet, right, an electromagnet, and it is repulsive around the magnets on the outside. And the coolest part of this was when they bolted the thing all back together, and we took it, and if you have a bench vise, I like to put it in a bench vise because then it doesn't get squirrely when you turn it on with the jumper cables. Don't have to do that. I've tested motors just sitting on a bench, but we put it in this bench vise, and I had the students do this. This isn't me doing this. They've got their hands on this, and several of them were like, oh, it's dirty. Yeah, it is. Real world is dirty. It'll be fine. We'll wash your hands when we're done. But when they took that jumper cable and touched it to the terminal end on that starter, and it spun, they were impressed with themselves. They understood. They built an electric motor, a real one, if you want to say. And the ones that you had them building in your class were every bit as real, but somehow different when it's one that bolts onto a piece of equipment.
Absolutely.
And when a student's impressed with themselves, that's when I celebrate. I think that's when the job has gotten done. So we kind of stepped them through that, and then there's just some wrap-up questions here. What kind of energy is put into a starter? And this was something that I think you took back to your classroom, and we're still having discussions around once you got back. So that's kind of the overall lesson plan, and at the end of the webinar, there will be a link that comes out in an email that will have this link embedded in it too. So I can see a couple folks were able to take a look at this. If you weren't able to find your way to this link, it'll come in an email afterwards. So let me switch back to our presentation a minute here.
And while Avery's switching, he kept saying, when you hook it and when you do that, you're not doing that. You let him do that, because I didn't know what I was doing. I just said, no, that's your job, not mine. So
Stop sharing, and I need to turn back on.
that's what he's there for, the stuff that I don't know.
Well, I think that's, just that connection to, I can see one of the questions, and we'll take the question at the end, but I can see one of the questions was, okay, so why are we calling this STEM? Well, because now it's connected to industry problem or that business application. Now it kind of takes on a different life of its own.
It does.
So Wendy, student perceptions, what'd they think? What'd they say?
High engagement. We have a couple links there. We're not going to click on those, but the engagement was outrageous. The students were like, when are we going to do this again? Where else are we going to go? Mrs. Vogel, can we go somewhere else? Because I want to try something like this. They wanted to know when they could start high school. Did they have to go to a certain high school in order to go here? And so it was really, really engaging to students. They enjoyed tremendously, not just the excitement of being at the airport with all of these planes that they saw high school students coming in and out and working on this equipment as well. They also they had their hands on that equipment too. And so there was a real life application and a high engagement piece for that. And they really wanted to continue on with something similar to that in the future. And so it was so cool is the overarching,
that's the quote, right?
the
From middle school.
overarching quote.
So cool.
It was so cool, which was, the point. One of the points. So, and we have some of my friends here working on their motor, and you can see the high engagement level. I've got one of my friends in the back there that's not a huge fan of getting too close to other groups members, but he can barely stay away too. And they're all just digging in as they should be.
Yeah.
It's one of our favorite pictures, I think, from this whole event. And
this
I had a
one
lot
right
of
here.
great pictures from this event, but this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So
what'd you think?
Yeah, what did I think? Well, it was a very positive experience all the way around. I love to go on field trips, so that was part of my piece, was like, let's get out of here. So we did, and I think it was on a colder month that we were out too, which is always really nice.
Yeah, November maybe?
It might have been, but it was, you were very easy to work with. That was a really nice benefit.
They pay me to do
that. They
do.
They do. You met the needs of where I needed to go in my classroom. I said, this is what I have. You said, this is what I have. And we were able to work together to figure that out. There was no, okay, this is what you have to do for STEM. There wasn't any of that. It was, what do you need? This is what I need. Let's try this. Yeah. So that was very easy to do. I told you that student engagement is extraordinarily high, and the hands-on component was a big hit. Yeah. Challenges for me specifically, motors weren't our focus in the classroom, and so we did need a little background. But you provided that when we got to the airport with the videos, so that was a nice addition. And then time and space. We did have this field trip occur over the course of 4 different days with 4 different groups. So there was some scheduling components there, and just making sure that we could get all of the students through, because we really couldn't I had about 130 students that year, and we couldn't possibly get all of them there in one day, because you can't fit them there, and there wasn't enough work to do there. So we went by homerooms, and we did, about 2 hours out of the class during our core time. So it worked out really, really well, but it did take some planning and some time to actually do that. So but I think, let's see, suggestions. My only suggestion would really be to all of you guys out there listening and watching is if you have an idea, or even if you don't, and I think I saw Tina write a couple of things down about what does it look like in kindergarten. I don't know. Let's find out, Tina. Let's find out what it's going to look like in kindergarten. I think you know a little bit. You've done a few things with those little bitties. But let's see what there is out there. Do you have an idea? If not, maybe we have one, but let's find a way to just get out there and do it and see what it's going to look like.
I'll say
playing
this.
a little bit.
I have last year and the year before, actually, and this year even some already. I've had an opportunity. I've got a small aeronautical engineering lesson that I do with kindergartners. And I got to tell you guys something about little kids like that. A lot of times folks will say, oh, STEM, that's for the A++ers. They're definitely going to college, and they're going to. No, it's not. What it is the integration of these different topics, and then what can we do with it? Well, anybody here ever, seen a little kid that didn't, do something crazy like stick their sucker to the wall, or pick their nose and flick it and kind of watch the arc that it makes as it flies through there. All that weird little stuff that they're doing, they're experimenting with their world, and they're seeing, well, I know I'm supposed to eat this sucker, but it feels kind of sticky. Maybe it'll stick to the wall. And they're dealing with all of these concepts. And I got to tell you, I've worked with a lot of different engineers over the course of my career, and these kindergartners, this one specific class that I'm thinking of, they were ideating and coming up with ideas and correlating different bodies of knowledge faster and better than like masters and PhD people that I've had the opportunity to work with. So they can do it. You just got to give them an opportunity. So yes, definitely can be done with multiple grade levels. I have no problem with that. They'd be great.
Yeah. And I just addressed, I'll mention, because Tina just asked a question that I think would be good to ask now. How often did I do a STEM activity with my students? Honestly, Tina, not extraordinarily often, except for the fact that the science part is always there because that's what I did in middle school, was teach science. But it's something that is difficult to integrate at first until you've got kind of a routine. And I think that's what every science teacher is going through. K-8, 12 right now is, what does it look like? Where does it fit? What's the point?
Application.
And and from a science standards point of view, it's not to be pulled out as an engineering activity. It's supposed to be embedded into what we do. And so it's evolving right now, is what I would say.
So that's kind of the overall. I want to just share really quick when our next webinar, we're almost 40 minutes here. We'll get to the question and answer here in just a second. Our next webinar, though, will be November 10th, 2015, and that one we're pushing back towards 5 to 6 p.m. This slot was 4 to 5. I got a 4th grade teacher that I've done some work with. Maureen Kazanowski, again from Kentwood, represent Kentwood.
Kentwood Action.
And we're going to talk about motion, forces, acceleration, and gravity. So that's the next one. Please join us and or pass this on if you found this beneficial, and let some of your peer teachers know, because we want to have as many teachers as possible have this really neat integrated lesson where they're taking the science and the technology and layering it with engineering and mathematics and having really, really engaged kids like Wendy was just sharing about.
And it doesn't have to just integrate engineering. I mean, if you've got a math and science unit that you're doing together, that is a STEM world. Adding the real world piece is the trick. So, A
couple links here, and then we'll get to that Q&A. You can get a hold of us. Myself and my peer STEM consultant is named Rick Mushing. bit.ly/STEM-KISD. We do have a Google community. Please join us there. We share stuff on there all the time, things that we're seeing from business, local businesses that would love to connect with classrooms, opportunities to do that, other work. We've got a blog that we've just gotten started on, so that's still developing, but you can take a look there. And then Wendy, talk about your new role and some of your contact info.
I'm now the science consultant here in the county, so for the ISD. So if there's any needs in that department, anywhere from classroom level up to curriculum pieces at a district level, that's my job. So if you're curious as to try something new and you want to see how that science fits into, even, it could take both of us, could take one of us, call me in. I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. So,
excellent. All right, so Q&A, and I'm just going to kind of slide over here in the chat and take a look at a couple of these.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. My
Andrew's on it.
Andrew's going to pass some of these questions off to us. So what do we have here, Andrew?
So the first question, and I think this is actually my question, but you answered the question about can you do STEM with kindergarten students, and you referenced one of the lessons that you did. Would you be willing to share that lesson with others, or how might others be able to access lessons, or you to be able to do that?
Yep. So the lesson that we did, we've got an unmanned aerial vehicle. We know them as drones, thanks to the media. So we've got a grant-funded device here at the ISD, right? And I know actually a lot of different folks are starting to get into that. It's kind of drones and things that fly are my specialty, so I was able to get this grant-funded piece of tech. Really cool. So the thing that the kindergartners are trying to do, I'll just give you a short overview, and then maybe I can get a link to that written lesson plan on that as well and send it out with the email blast for this. Short version, it doesn't have any kind of cargo carrying device on board, right? So their job is to figure out how they can do that. With the goal being that they learn to, and I think in kindergarten they need to be able to count, add, and subtract within up to 20, right? So the teacher gives them 20 or 30 blocks, and then their cargo carrying device that they designed from crafty kind of stuff, whatever you've got, bottles, we use like toilet paper rolls and stuff like that, tape, pipe cleaners, whatever. And they use these base 10 blocks, and they have to be able to carry, and you can massage this however you want to, but the first teacher that I did this with said, okay, you got to be able to carry 10 of these things. You got to be able to attach it to the drone, and it's going to fly from here to there, and then we're going to unload it, and you have to tell me how many trips it's going to take to move all of your 37 blocks or your 52 or whatever it happens to be. So they're kind of parsing that out, and they're saying, okay, I've got this many 10, this many 10, this many 10. Okay, and then I have 7 left over if it's 47. Okay, that's 5 trips, right? Or sometimes they get it wrong and it's 4 trips and all their blocks don't move, and that's part of the learning. So that's the lesson, and I'll try and get a link out to you guys on that as well. So yeah, kindergarten aerospace engineering. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. The kids enjoyed it too.
Good.
Other questions, Mr. Andrew?
So, do you have teachers that are working on these lessons as cross-curricular lessons, or do you have just single teachers from a single subject area doing STEM?
Sure. So another one, ideally, right? Ideally, like Wendy just hinted at, what you would want is, a couple of different disciplines integrated and then really applied to some kind of, like we said at the beginning in the definition, some industry practice, right? So normally what we do is, if we work with anybody, if you're willing, we'll come and work with you. But one example that I would give that was really neat was a high school Algebra 2 class and a high school physical science class. They're right across the hall from each other. It worked out great. These two guys work together all the time. And in Algebra 2, they were talking about vector addition, and in physical science, what were they talking about? Reflection and absorption of light, right? So when I go flying, when I teach students to fly an airplane, the wind is blowing us this direction at this velocity. I'm flying this direction at this velocity. And envision trying to swim across a stream, right? So you're trying to swim across a stream. If you point yourself straight towards the other bank, you'll get washed downstream, right? So I actually have to solve for the resultant vector and fly my plane slightly upwind, if you want to say, so that I end up in, Southern California and not Seattle, Washington, because people don't like to pay if they end up in the wrong city. So flight planning, that piece of it was what we did with the mathematics class. And then the science class, we were flying around using that UAV again, the drone. And the students had designed different lens filters that went over a camera. And they were looking at filtering out different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, anticipating that would give them differing insight into the field, grass, whatever it was we were flying over. So we try to work with multiple disciplines, and when those two come together, the students really see, that's really how it works in the adult world of work. It's not just my math class or just my history class or just my English class. It's, I'm going to have to solve this problem. That's what I'm being paid for, and I'm going to, pick up my algebra and I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to set it down, and then it's like, if this is a Rubik's Cube, now I'm going to pick up my English and read that technical manual and make sense of it and then set that down, and now I'm going to pick up my pre-calculus and mess with it some more, and eventually you solve the Rubik's Cube, right, the problem. And that's really what it's about. Any other questions, Mr. Moderator?
Yes. So one of the participants mentioned that a lot of schools that she works with want to implement STEM but struggle with actually bringing it to their classrooms, and they get caught up on trying to meet all the standards. They feel like they don't have enough time to meet all the standards and implement STEM. And they're also finding some challenges with just implementing it within the typical school day. So do you have any suggestions on how to overcome those hurdles?
So I'm going to ask Wendy, who's been in the classroom more recently than myself, to comment on that first. Wendy, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Time is always an issue with teachers. We have a limited amount of time with our students every day. At the elementary level, science isn't taught as much. Math and language arts a little bit more.
Sure.
And then you have, you have a large chunk of standards at the middle school level and pretty heavy ones at the high school as well. One of the things I would say is it isn't intended to be a separate entity. And so if it is an addition to what you're already doing, then of course it's going to be an added burden. So really the intent is how can you cover X, Y, and Z standards, but within this real world problem that may be STEM related or is STEM related. That does take some time and effort to front load and ask
plan.
ahead
Yeah.
and get things in order. But that's the intent. We do have a few resources for that, although those are still, since the STEM is a fairly new, even a new phrase, we're still
Used to be Met,
yeah.
Thames.
There you go.
It really was.
And it's sort of in progress right now.
Yeah.
But the intent is not to be an add-on. It's a vehicle to add different standards in. And I've seen some schools where they will actually add, they will develop units intentionally with language arts, math, and science through an engineering lens or through a problem-solving lens that allows you to cover a STEM type situation. So that's probably the best way to answer that question
Yeah,
now.
I agree completely with what my peer just said. In short, we can't make more time, right? But what we can do is teach this math while we're covering that science. And a lot of times the engagement goes way up when it's based on a real world industry item. And working in career readiness, that's kind of that's where my work lies. So what Wendy said.
And finding time with your peers to collaborate if you have separate math teachers or if you're not the only, third grade teacher or kindergarten teacher, having time to work with them, is something that's helpful, but not always given the opportunity during the school day to do that. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it can be done. It can be done very successfully.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yep. So this is a related question. Do you have a process or even a list of standards for, I guess, figuring out which standards best align or best fit with STEM?
So go ahead. You look like
I'm gonna go. Can I field that one?
Go for it.
If you look at the new Michigan science standards, which are online at the MDE science website, which are actually just the next generation science standards that are being adopted in a couple weeks here. There is a set of engineering appropriate standards per grade span, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. And each of those, there's between 2 and 4 engineering standards per grade span. So that would give you an idea of what is age appropriate. And again, I can send that link out with the email you're going to do. And those would be the engineering pieces that are to be embedded within the standards at each grade level, on top of the fact that there is an engineering or science practice attached to each of those science standards as well. Then linked at the bottom, to make it a little more convenient, is a set of Common Core related standards for math and language arts as well, so that you can look at sort of embedding them all into a problem
That's what I was
practice.
Going to say.
Yep.
At the bottom of those, they've got links that help connect the dots for you. So we're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
Thanks.
What else, Andrew?
So Robin actually had a question related to kindergarten and STEM. So she's piloting a Battle Creek science unit on motion, pushes and pulls in kindergarten. So any ideas for ways you'd want to support in that area?
Yeah. I had another group of kindergartners that I was working with on exactly that, pushes and pulls. So I start out with, again, I got this new toy, right? This cool new unmanned aerial vehicle, and I'm using the daylights out of it. So I take that out and I flew it around for this group in the gym, so you can fly it inside or outside. And we had a discussion around, well, what's holding it on the ground? Why is it that it flies? What makes that happen? And once I get them over the idea that it's when I push this button that it starts flying, we could start to explore some of the physical science around forces of motion, Newtonian mechanics, and that stuck with those kids because I got several emails from the faculty in that case writing me back and saying, hey, well, can you share a little bit more about that? Could you come in and talk about expanded concepts? So that's one thing that I've done with that.
Mm-hmm.
Last question in the chat. If I scroll to the bottom, Tina wants to know, do you have a process for looking at standards and figuring out... Oh, after that. This is on the Next Gen website.
The engineering standards
Yes.
are, yes. Yep, you can find them when you search. Michigan has adopted by topic, So if you go to the Next Gen website, click on the topic view, and then there's a whole list of kindergarten through 12th grade standards. And once you get there, at the if you scroll through there, they are located there. But again, I will, with Avery's email, I will send out that link to make it a little bit easier to get, because Michigan has a little bit easier version of it to read, so you don't have to sift through all of the extra Next Gen stuff.
Excellent. I think that's where we wanted to land. Is there another question? Andrew says we've got more. We'll take some more.
Got lots of questions. So, and if there are more questions in addition to this, please share them in the chat. And this is actually one of my questions. So you guys are talking about STEM, and I saw STEAM come up in the chat. So could you maybe talk about what STEAM is and how that compares to STEM, maybe pros, cons?
Yeah, so I was talking before that STEM used to be METS, it was TEMS. Right now it's STEM. We've also heard STEAM. There's STEM X, that's STEM plus kind of everything else. There's STREAM. There's a bunch of different variants. STEAM usually is like in that lesson plan document that we shared before, STE, science, technology, engineering, and then the A would be art, and then M, mathematics, right? So the art, for us at the ISD, there's an aesthetic embedded within engineering. When I have somebody design or build something for a plane, it can't look like a butt and then bolt it to the side of my plane. It has to look good. Otherwise, it reduces the value, right, of whatever it is. Or it does. Or if you have, when you talk to Wolverine Worldwide, right, here in Rockford locally, they're designing shoes or clothes and things that we wear. It has to look decent when you go through that design process. Otherwise, it's not going to be marketable. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And just for us, we roll that artistic side, like Hayden Land in that video when he was talking about, kind of that divergent thought skill set that some folks really possess. For us, that just kind of rolls into the engineering piece, which is why I'm a STEM and not a STEAM consultant. We still have it in there, but for us, it's rolled into the engineering side. Any comments on that?
No, I think there's just a lot of letters that have been added here and there just to add components to that might fit a particular need of an area, or just to add some cross-curricular pieces too.
Yeah, I've heard of STEM H too. I just thought of that one.
Okay.
STEM H, that's health, right, on the back side of that. So for me, that would fold up into the science side of things.
So you mentioned all those other, I guess, types of STEM, and Tina mentioned STREAM, which includes religion. Do you have any resources to, I guess, support these other types of STEM that incorporate other aspects like health or religion, etc.?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably all going to be encompassed within STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We as the ISD have just kind of chosen to go down that specific path. And, it's not like any one topic is less important or more important. I cannot understand how to operate a piece of technical equipment unless I can read the manual and make sense of that. So I need my English class, I need my literacy, I need all of the different parts of it. And I guess it would all just fold in together for me, usually applied to some business practice. So I guess that's my answer. Any thoughts, Wendy?
But just that, we would like to meet you at the needs that with what you need. So that came out very poorly, but what do you need, and let us know, because that's what our job is, and we can do we can take some time and figure that out together, and see what we can help you do. I think.
Wendy mentioned, when she and I started working together on this lesson, it was just a couple emails back and forth, and then it turned into kind of a Google Doc where we were throwing some ideas, and then that lesson plan that you guys have access to, that's kind of the finished product. It's been refined 3 or 4 times, gone through the design process, several iterations to get it to that point. So let us know what you got or what you're thinking, and we'll work with you.
Great. Bobby and Robin have mentioned some interest in utilizing the drone, which I know you hate that word, but
I was watching you behind. We're saying it because I've heard it so many times.
That's really what we call them. And yes, absolutely. My contact information, you just reach out to me and I can work with you on that. And as long as you guys are asking about some technology that might be available to you, in addition to that, the ISD also got some grant-funded 3D printers. And we've got, I say printers because we do have two. Yeah. One that can come out to a school, and my peer STEM consultant, his name's Rick Mushing, I mentioned him before. That's kind of his baby, and he'll come out and do a demonstration and leave that printer with you for a couple weeks, and then then it usually moves on to another school because folks are really interested in that equipment as well. The second printer stays here at the ISD. There's some free software that you can use to kind of draw up whatever you want the printer to do, and if you send us that file, Rick can work with you to print that off. So I tell you that to tell you this. Yes, you can set up days and times. Reach out to me specifically, and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
I usually try and give me, I can't do it next week because I'm already booked full. So give me a couple weeks out, and usually I can work with you.
Yeah, and the printer thing is pretty sweet because you print to solve a problem. We had one teacher at science team last week mentioned that they were having trouble hooking their screens, their fencing kept flying in the wind.
Yeah, it was.
So the students actually created a clip with the 3D printer that held the screen or held the fencing in place.
That's right.
So it was a real world place-based.
Their real world.
Their real world place-based situation that they were able to solve a need on their playground or their common area. I'm not sure where that was.
It was greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Greenhouse.
Okay, that's right.
Other thoughts?
Yes. So you mentioned that you guys can go out there and actually do lessons, help teachers with planning lessons. Tina asked if you actually hold any lesson planning sessions, maybe here at the ISD or out in schools. Do you do that with teachers?
We do. So let's see, how do I direct you to get there? It would be on our PD Hub. That email that I was talking about that's going to come out to you guys after this webinar will be coming from PD Hub. And within that, there's usually a link I think it's towards the bottom of the email. And it talks about, interested in other PD offerings, click here type of a thing. And when you click on that, you can go through and I think you can filter by STEM if that's your specific interest, or you can filter by, we do a lot of different things here at the ISD. So you can look through that and find more information on that.
Great. And I think that was our last question.
Okay. So thanks again for joining us for STEM in the Classroom. Hope to see you next time, and bring a friend. We're doing this as a webinar series to make it as convenient as possible because we know that like that last question, it can be challenging. Sometimes you can make it out for a PD, sometimes you can't get a sub, sometimes it's too big of a pain in the neck to make it work. So hopefully everybody's finding the webinar format to be beneficial, and we're going to be doing one of these a month for the remainder of the 2015-2016 school year. Next time, Maureen Kazanowski out of Kentwood. So same bat time, same bat channel. Come on back and we'll talk some more.
See you guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye. Thanks.